So by definition, a refugee globally is someone who's living outside their home country and they've fled because they have a fear of persecution. That's the legal definition that's accepted by the United Nations, that they have fled their home country. They've literally crossed a border into a country where they do not have citizenship due to persecution. The United States takes, in terms of numbers, takes the largest number of refugees, but in terms of percentage of population, it's not anywhere near the top. Some of the Scandinavian countries take a larger percentage of their total population, even though the numbers, the absolute numbers are smaller. We take around, I think this last fiscal year we took around 75,000. But at any point in time, there are anywhere from 12 to 15 million refugees who have fled their home country. So there's just a small fraction of that actually get resettled into a third country. When they have fled their home country, they've gone into usually a neighboring country, and they've ended up oftentimes in refugee camps that the United Nations runs. And then once they're in those refugee camps, they really have three options. They can go back home, they can integrate locally in that country, or they can be resettled in a third country. The vast majority of the refugees around the world end up going back home. And in fact, when they fled, they thought it was going to be temporary. Then their second choice would be to stay locally where they are. You know, they're in a country right next door to their home country. It's going to be culturally closer to their own cultural identity. But many times the countries that have let them in have done so reluctantly, and they've said, look, you can't stay here. So you either have to go back home or you have to go someplace else. Actually, what happens is for a person who's a refugee, say living in a refugee camp, for them to come into the United States, they have to be accepted by the U.S. government into the U.S. Refugee Resettlement Program. They go through an interview process. Certain individuals will have a background screening to make sure that they're not terrorists, that sort of thing. They'll go through health screenings. They have to prove who they are. They have to prove that they have a well-founded fear of persecution, and that they can't really go back home and they can't integrate locally. Then the State Department actually sits down with 10 national agencies that have contracts with State Department to provide refugee resettlement, to sponsor refugees. And the refugee family is literally assigned to one of those 10 agencies. So, for example, International Institute of St. Louis is affiliated with the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants. And so if a family is allocated to USCRI, USCRI then looks at the information about that family. They see how many people are in the family, what their language is, if there are any particular health problems they have or any other special things about them. And they'll look at that family and they'll say, you know, we know that the International Institute of St. Louis has a case specialist who speaks this language. They have services that would fit with this family, so they ask us to sponsor that family. Every year, the population of refugees changes. Vietnamese, Eastern Europe, Poles came. Some people from Yugoslavia came. Somalia, Iraq, Bhutanese, Burma, Ethiopia, the Congo, Eritrea, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Uzbekistan. The largest number of Bosnians living outside of Bosnia. All of these groups ended up leaving because they were being persecuted or they were at risk of persecution.